Well, good morning. Today is Tuesday, May the 5th. It's Cinco de Mayo, and it's Taco Tuesday, so you have a lot to look forward to today. If you can make yourself some tacos or go get yourself some tacos this afternoon, do a little bit of celebrating for how good God has been to us. I want to bring to you a devotional from the book of 1 Kings, it's going to be in 1 Kings chapter 15. I want to talk to you today about a man named Asa. Asa was the king of Judah, and which was the southern part of Israel. After Solomon was king, Israel split into two parts, and Judah was the more faithful of the two kingdoms. But Judah wasn't always faithful. Asa, in fact, stood up and did what was right in a very difficult time. So if you would, let's read together in 1 Kings chapter 15. I'm going to read verses 9 through 14. It says, "In the 20th year of Israel's king Jeroboam, Asa became king of Judah, and he reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His grandmother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. Asa did what was right in the Lord's sight, as his ancestor David had done. He banished the male cult prostitutes from the land and removed all of the idols that his fathers had made. He also removed his grandmother Maacah from being queen mother because she had made an obscene image of Asherah. Asa chopped down her obscene image and burned it in the Kidron Valley. The high places were not taken away, but Asa was wholeheartedly devoted to the Lord his entire life." In these few verses, we see something extraordinary that happens because one man chooses to be faithful to God. Now, this is Mother's Day week leading up to Mother's Day, and so this narrative we read today represents what happens with an ungodly mother. When I come to you on Thursday, I plan to show you what happens with a godly mother. And so don't be discouraged by her, just use her as a cautionary tale. Now let's look at verse 11. Verse 11 says, Asa did what was right in the Lord's sight, just as his ancestor David had done. Now neither Asa nor David were perfect. But listen, he did what was right in the sight of the Lord. He did something brave. The kings before him had been evil in Judah. The kings in Israel were evil. They were worshiping false gods. And so he does what is right in the sight of the Lord. That's exactly the opposite of what happened in the book of Judges. In the book of Judges, it says that every man did what was right in his own eyes. Kind of sounds a little bit like our times. So I want you to take courage from Asa today. Do what's right in the sight of the Lord, not because it's the popular thing to do, not because it's going to necessarily earn you riches that are on this earth, but because it's right in the Lord's sight, and God rewards righteousness. In fact, we find out that Asa reigned for 41 years. His counterparts in northern Israel, none of them reigned that long. In fact, if you read in chapter 16, you see that there are several who reigned, and some reigned 2 years, and there was one that only reigned for 7 days. And it shows just how righteous Asa was compared to these others. And so do what's right, not because it's going to earn you something, but because it's right in the Lord's sight, and because the Lord rewards those who are faithful to Him. Maybe not on this earth, but He will reward us at some time. Now I want us to look at verse 13. In verse 13 it said, "He also removed his grandmother Maacah from being queen mother." Oh my goodness, how in the world could he do that? Can you imagine having to say to your grandmother, "You're no longer on your throne. You're not the queen anymore"? Why did he do that, though? It wasn't just because he was a young punk. It was because she was doing something that was evil. It says in verse 13, he removed her from being queen mother because she had made an obscene image of Asherah. Now, you wonder, what is Asherah? Asherah, the people who worship Baal, that was a false god at that time, they would worship two idols. One was Baal, and he was like considered the male god. And the other one was the Asherah, and she was considered like the female goddess. And so they believed that these two brought them blessings, and they believed many obscene things about them. In fact, he says this is an obscene image. We see that he removed the male cult prostitutes. That just tells you how bad things were, what they were doing, how they were perverting the worship of God. They were worshiping false gods, and so they're not even worshiping the one true God. And so we have to ask ourselves in our lives, are there some things that we do that the Bible speaks clearly against? Or there's some things that we put up on a pedestal with God? You know what those things are in your life probably. We equate with God. And so it's very dangerous to do that. We need to tear down those idols just as this King Asa, who was faithful, he did. Now, the other thing that we see, in verse 14, he's not perfect. It says, the high places were not taken away, but Asa was wholeheartedly devoted to the Lord his God his entire life. What is it talking about with those high places? The high places were the places where people would go to worship. And sometimes they did sacrifice to the Lord. Other times they sacrificed to false gods. We know that probably those Asherah poles, that's where they were set up. He tore those down, but he didn't necessarily tear down the altars of the high places. And so maybe that was problematic, but it does say something to us. It says, but Asa was wholeheartedly devoted to the Lord his entire life. You know, compared to what Asa could have done, he did so much to further the worship of God, to turn people away from the false gods and turn them to the one true God. And so I want to say to you, none of us are perfect. We're all going to have that, but he didn't do this. But hopefully it can be said about us, but he was or she was faithful to the Lord for her entire life, for his entire life. And so I just want to challenge you today, be an Asa in a world full of evil. Be somebody who's willing to stand for the Lord their God, no matter what the cost might be. Maybe you don't know the Lord, but you're being called to him right now, and you need to know a little bit more about what that means. I'd love for you to email me, revronnie8710@att.net. I'd love for you to call me, 504-340-7175, so we can talk some more about that. I do want to share with you a hymn today that goes along with this. It's called Trust and Obey. And it just talks about how we've got to trust Jesus. And no matter what the cost might be, trust him and obey him. And this is how it goes. When we walk with the Lord in the light of his word, what a glory he sheds on our way. Let us do our good will. He abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Then in fellowship sweet, we will sit at his feet, or we'll walk by his side in the way. What he says we will do, where he sends we will go. Never fear, only trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. All right, God bless you. I'll see you on Thursday for another encouraging word.